John William Hedges, a 14-year-old boy labeled as a bad lad in a society filled with hardships, began his life under terrible conditions. But was this the beginning of a tragedy, or the story of incredible in 1888? After being convicted of theft, John was sentenced to 21 years in prison and 5 years of reform. A harsh and cold judgment, but it was just the beginning of a journey through unexpected twists. Could this poor boy find a way to change his life? Or would he remain trapped in the social trap that had been predetermined for from prison, reform, to the battlefield? John gradually overcame his fate, becoming a soldier, a husband, and a father. His life proves that no matter where you start, with enough resilience, you can still write your own story. So, who was John William Hedges really? A failure or a silent hero? Let's explore the full story of John William Hedges' life from his. John William Hedges was born on April 22, 1874, in a small house at 108 Meadow Street, Sheffield, where his parents lived in poverty. His mother, Mary Hedges, was the sole provider for the family. His father, John Hedges Sr., was a knife maker, a trade specific to Sheffield, but the family was always immersed in hardship from a very young age. John had to face a painful reality. His mother passed away when John was just 10 years old, leaving a significant void in the boy's heart. After that, John had to live without the warmth of love, amidst lonely and unsettling days. His father, sick and unable to care for his children, and the early loss of his mother, created a difficult and challenging environment for John's growth. These emotional burdens gradually caused the boy to lose his way, and during his childhood years, John ventured down a path that many children would dread, the path of rebellion and crime. But that wasn't all. In 1881, when John was only 7 years old, we witness a significant change in the Hedges family. Data from the family's census records reveals that they were no longer living like a typical family. His mother, Mary Hedges, appeared in the records under the name Mary Piggott, using her mother's surname, and was listed as single. John Hedges Sr., the father, had disappeared from the census and was replaced by a John Hedges, a knife maker, the same man, but under a different name. This raises major questions. Why did the Hedges family hide the truth about their relationship? Could this be a sign of family discord, an imperfect marriage, or an emotional tragedy between a couple caught in an unhappy situation? These questions could only be answered when we look at the death of Mary Hedges in April 1884. Her sudden passing left a deep scar in the family and marked a turning point in John's life. By the time she passed, his father was no longer the strong man he once was, but a sickly figure who couldn't fulfill his responsibilities as a father. And while things at home became chaotic, John fell into a state of confusion and lost control. Losing his mother, with a weak father and an unstable home, created an environment that was easy to lead him into the wrong path. With the irreplaceable losses, John gradually became a bad lad, as his father later described him in the years that followed. By 1888, when John was 14, his life completely collapsed when he was brought to court in Sheffield for theft. This marked the beginning of the tragic story of a child who couldn't find a way out of his life. With a sentence of 21 days in prison and 5 years of reform, John was thrown into a harsh reform school. However, one important question must be asked here. Was this the first time John had faced society's judgment? Or was it just a part of the long, difficult journey he had been enduring? With the verdict delivered shortly after he was convicted, John Hedges' life took a completely new turn, one devoid of hope. The years spent in the reform school became a turning point in John's life, and it was then that he had to face the internal struggle to change himself or continue sinking into past mistakes. And the most important question of all, what made John, a boy judged as bad, able to change his life and find a way out? After being convicted and sent to the reform school, John Hedges' life seemed to come to a standstill. The reform school was not just a place for children like John. It was a harsh challenge designed to reform them into good citizens, according to the societal norms of that time. But was this the place where John would change, or just another place where he would continue to sink deeper into the darkness of his past? When John entered the reform school, he underwent a prolonged separation from his family, friends, and society. At just 14 years old, he was still grappling with confusion about life, the death of his mother, and his father's impotence. His first years in the reform school could be described as a life filled with doubts and resistance. John had to face not only the severity of the guards, but also other boys who were deemed unsalvageable by society. Yet in the harshness of this environment, John began to realize that not everything that had happened to him was his destiny. Life in the reform school taught him not just discipline, but the struggle to survive. The Calder Farm Reform School, where John was sent, was known for its strict educational methods and severe punishments. According to records, John had to live under constant supervision, isolated from the outside world. He was required to engage in labor, from gardening to heavy manual work. This was a place where children were not only reformed, but had to learn to be independent and take responsibility for their own lives. However, not everyone could overcome these challenges. It was during these harsh years that John began to understand that his life would never be like that of ordinary people. He learned to rise up from failures and setbacks. However, despite all the difficulties during his time in the reform school, it is undeniable that John found a part of change within himself. The reform school's records show that, although John was not an outstanding student in his lessons, he made a determined effort to overcome every obstacle. The reform school did not just teach him survival skills. It gave him the opportunity to learn respect, discipline, and sacrifice. These lessons surely prepared him for a different path once he left the school. With the death of his father during John's incarceration, losing a loved one left him feeling even more lost. With no father to guide him, he had to figure out life on his own. Yet, it was in these difficult times that John realized that no one would save him unless he rose up himself. This realization pushed him to find a way to change, refusing to succumb to fate. A particularly special moment in John's life came when he was allowed to visit an old friend from his childhood. This rare experience during the harsh years in the reform school marked an important milestone in his recovery process. This meeting was not only an opportunity to reconnect with a friend, but also a pivotal point in John's journey of transformation. Slowly, life began to return to normal after so many years of enduring loneliness. The administrators of the Calder Farm Reform School worked diligently to help the young inmates improve and mend their wrongs. Despite their efforts, John's life remained filled with uncertainty. He began to realize that, despite enduring so much suffering, without a change within himself, he would never be able to step into the outside world and lead a better life. After leaving the reform school, John William Hedges faced a world full of challenges. Although he had undergone the reformation that society had deemed necessary, now John had to rebuild his life from scratch. He was no longer a carefree child, but a 19-year-old young man with a dark past, now having to shoulder the responsibility of his future. Stepping out of the gates of Calder Farm Reform School, John William Hedges may have imagined a brighter future, but in reality, his life remained filled with uncertainty. While he recognized the need for change, the emotional wounds were still raw. He felt lost, without the support of family, no old friends to turn to, and without clear direction for his life. The years in the reform school hadn't been a complete transformation. However, deep down, John still felt something was amiss. He had to fight on his own to resist the temptations of society and the bad habits he had been influenced by during his long years in the system. Still, it was undeniable that those tough years had shaped a part of who John was, and he began to realize the importance of living a life of responsibility. In November 1893, a pivotal event occurred in John's life. He married Mary, the woman with whom he would build a family. However, this marriage was not the result of deep, passionate love at first sight, but rather a practical decision. After his years in the reform school, John had few options left, and marriage seemed like a way to stabilize his life. It also gave him a chance to prove himself as a responsible man, a husband who could take care of his family. After marrying, John and Mary settled in Brightside Beer, where they lived with Mary's sister, Ada, and her family. The first years of their marriage were not easy, but they gave John a sense of security and responsibility. With the birth of their daughter Louise, their family grew with the arrival of their son John, significant milestones in John's life as a father. However, like many men of that era, life wasn't just about family. It also included a duty to the country. When World War I broke out in 1914, John decided to enlist. This wasn't an easy decision for him, as he had a difficult past and poor health. However, as a grown man, John felt a sense of duty to serve his country and protect it during the war. What's notable is that John wasn't new to the army. Before the war, he had served for 6 years in the 3rd West Riding Regiment and had participated in the Boer War. During this time, he contracted malaria, which left lasting effects on his health. Despite the health challenges, John chose to rejoin the army in 1914. At the age of 40, just 6 weeks after enlisting, John was promoted to Lance Corporal, and within 6 months, he was a corporal. However, his emotional recovery was short. In 1915, during a leave, his health began to deteriorate further. Despite receiving numerous treatments, his heart condition worsened, and he could no longer continue fighting. In 1916, while hospitalized at the military hospital in Buttevant Island, John died from his heart disease. He was only 42 years old. Although John didn't die in battle, he gave his all for his country, and the harsh conditions of the war exacerbated his heart condition. However, his life story isn't just about sacrifice. It's about resilience. It's the story of a man who overcame all the odds to live a meaningful life. After John's death in 1916, his family members struggled with the pain of loss, but they continued on with the legacies he left behind. His wife, Marianne Kate, received a government pension from the British government due to his death. Although John passed away from heart disease caused by the wounds of war, he was still recognized and honored for his contributions during his years of military service. John's death also marked an important milestone for his family. Marianne, his wife, had to continue her life without her partner. Along with this, John's children grew up in the shadow of a father they never fully understood. However, John's life continued to have a deep influence on them, even though he was no longer there. Beyond his family, John's legacy was also acknowledged within the community. While he was not a prominent soldier in the history of war, he was remembered as someone who gave everything for his country. His sacrifice was not a tale of grand heroism, but rather an inspiring story of strength, resilience, and dedication. He was a soldier who fought not only for his country, but also for the things he loved. Though John had a past filled with challenges, he proved that no matter how difficult life may be, we can still stand strong and find respect and value within ourselves. Even though his death came early and unexpectedly, the legacy he left behind serves as a testament to the strength of love, family, and resilience. Looking back on the life of John William Hedges, we see a story that is both heartbreaking and powerful. Starting as a poor child, orphaned by his mother, abandoned by his father, and living the life of a street child, John found himself caught in a vicious cycle of crime and reform. However, what stands out is that after leaving reform, he did not let himself be consumed by the past, but instead started anew, building a family, serving his country, and dedicating himself wholeheartedly. Although John did not have a perfect fairy tale ending, his story remains a testament to the power of change and resilience. It was his inner strength that allowed him to overcome every challenge, and although he may not have received the recognition he deserved from society at the time, looking at his story now, we see an admirable fortitude. John William Hedges is a living example that even though life may not be fair, and wrong choices may create long-lasting scars, we still have the power to change and rebuild our lives if we have the strength and determination. Though he didn't live long enough to witness the final results of his life, his story has left an indelible mark, serving as a reminder of the power of persistence and resolve. John William Hedges, despite enduring dark days, proved that no matter where life pushes us, there is always an opportunity to start anew. His journey stands as a testament to the power of resilience and the ability to rise above any circumstance. This is a touching story of perseverance and an unwavering determination to never give up. Thank you for following the inspiring story of John William Hedges. If you found this story inspiring and would like to explore more extraordinary journeys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any upcoming exciting videos. Please share your thoughts on this story in the comments section below. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share, we would love to hear from you. Stories of overcoming adversity are a great source of motivation for all of us. Make sure to hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest videos about true stories, resilient lives, and powerful transformations. Join our community so you don't miss any inspiring, human-centered, and valuable lessons from the past. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in future videos.